And welcome to the Obsolete Gamer Show. I am J.A. LaRock, and we're happy to be talking to another Florida-based gamer and game creator because we've been working with Game Trap and Make Games Miami to talk to various people who are making games in Florida because, a lot of times people head off to like Seattle, they head off to California, places like that. So when we have someone that's, homegrown for us here at Obsolete Gamer, it's great to be able to talk to them. And we're joined today by Aaron Varkonyi. And I just want to say, first of all, thanks for joining us. And I also thanks for the pronunciation on your Facebook page. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm thankful for that feature.
I mean, my last name being LaRock, when someone sees it, they say like Q or things like that. What happens when people try to pronounce your last name?
Varkonyi.
Oh, okay. All right, so I got to take a look at your game, Aliens Go Home Run, and I really liked the style of it, the colors. It talks about on Steam how it's like a mix of like Breakout, a baseball, and I just want to know first of all, how did you get started? Because I see that you in university at the University of Central Florida for computer sciences. So is that where you started as far as getting into gaming?
No, actually, I was into it as soon as like I was in high school. I originally I think what got me convinced to start doing game development. I originally tried it a bit during middle school, but I got out of it. But basically, like after playing Bayonetta 1, that game was just like the flow of it and just the gameplay I felt was so good that it's like I want to make games that have this like flow and this like, this challenge and stuff like that. It's basically what convinced me I want to make video games first as a hobby, and I'm not doing it as a career. I'm actually majoring in computer science, but I mostly got started during high school, and my first game came out while I was in college.
Hey, that's pretty cool. I mean, there's a lot of people that play games, they get inspired to want to get into gaming, but they never actually get to that point. Was it just part of your studies that gave you, really, I guess, the determination and the discipline to put together a game? Because, like I say, a lot of people try, but they don't get anything out.
I think it more had to do not really with my studies. I think my studies helped me learn a lot of the techniques because I major in computer science and mostly just on like programming stuff. But I feel a lot of it just has to do with like part of my motivation and my drive for doing a lot of these things is just I want to do great things, and because I say I'm gonna do great things, I feel that I need to. So like basically I just like I guess you could say like, my ego is sort of my ambition and it's what keeps me going, but at the same time, that could be a good thing also.
Now, was this the first game that you actually worked on, or did you work on like other prototypes, different types
I've
of
made
games?
like smaller web games for like game jams and like occasionally just free web stuff. This is the first game I've ever made that's like actually costs money though.
So, what was the development process of putting it together? Did you have to do like crowdfunding, self-funded? Like, what was that process?
No, I think I um basically, so I think I should tell you a bit about the history of this.
Sure.
So the majority of the game was between me and two other people. There was Artisano, the artist, there's me doing programming, and then there's Plustek doing music. Um, Artisano, concerning, he had these ideas for these characters that he has had since like at least 2012. And meanwhile, I had the idea for like, oh, I want to do a breakout game kind of like this. And I'm like, we're gonna do a thing for a game jam called GB Jam, which is like a jam where you make a game in the style of a Game Boy game. And I was like, hey, what if we took your characters and we put it in my idea? And he was fine with that. And it actually turned out really well. We got into like the top 25%. And then eventually I'm like, okay, well, maybe we can make like a color version of this and, make it better. And eventually I got Plustek to do the music. And from then on, we worked on it for like 1.5 years.
Wow. Yeah, when I'm looking at the reviews, a lot of people talk because I haven't been able to play it myself. I want a chance to do that. There's lots of like breakout clones, but this actually takes it to a new level. They talk about how you don't have to really worry so much about getting that last brick or worrying about just paying attention to their lives. It's more about controlling the ball placement, how it moves, things like that. So, what was your challenge? Seeing all the different breakout clones out there, being able to put together that's something that people recognize but is unique.
I think what you gotta do is like something another indie developer, I think he was from Israel, mainly inspired by another game that existed on like Japanese PCs back in the mid 90s called Highly Responsive to Prayers, which had a lot of the similar ideas of what we're doing, but the physics weren't as good and the gameplay wasn't as refined. And this is basically me seeing, okay, what's wrong with that game? How can we change it to be better? And that's part of it. I think some of the biggest challenges for me, and one of my like biggest challenges overall with making video games is making the physics. In this game, it wasn't as bad because there's only like two objects that require like actual like physics control, and that is the ball and the aliens that you can hit around like balls. But that was probably the biggest challenge, besides the individual bosses and making sure they work right.
Yeah, and listening to like the music and people talk about even controls being using like either the keyboard or using the controller, that gives it that extra depth. Especially like they were talking about using the slider and things like that. What overall was like your goal with the controls? Because like other breakout games, it's just they had like the little wheel that you could turn and things like that.
Well, I wanted something that felt snappy and felt more like an action game in a way than a breakout game. For one thing, like you don't actually in most breakout games, you control the direction of the ball by where it hits on the paddle, but you can't really do that in this game because your hit like radius is a lot smaller. Radius is the right word. I think I meant like the amount of range you have with your hit is a lot smaller. So I'm like, okay, how can we fix this? Let's do it by holding directions, and that's basically how I figured out how to make it work. Like you have like 9 total directions you can hit the ball. It used to be just 4, but people complained that there weren't enough, so I added like 4 more directions. And that basically like it makes the game more like an action game in that you have to like, I gotta hit the ball this way, I'm gonna hit it like this instead of trying to get my paddle over here.
Yeah, and as far as like putting the mix of music, I know that you had other people working on that, but was there just an overall inspiring of the type of music to give it like that action feel that you talk about?
I think the composer plus, like, he's a big fan of composers like Yosuke Yasui and Shinji Hosoe. Those are two like famous Japanese composers, and I just told him to go for his own style on this, and it happened to work really well. He also helped with a lot of the testing, and I think like, and he also did a lot of the sound effects. I think the sound effects also played a part in this also.
So I know that you said that it's not like you're going at this for a career, but you did put something together. It's out there on Steam right now. It's got positive reviews. Overall the experience, like, how's it been? Going out, putting up updates, things like that, and then reacting to like fans being positive with your about your work.
I'll tell you this much. The first week after your game comes out is going to be hell. Make sure you do it at like the beginning of spring break or winter break if you're in college, because you're going to spend at least a week or so updating the game every day, sometimes several times a day, trying to fix issues um, that people find. And then after that, it goes a lot slower. And yeah, generally, it didn't make as much money as as I thought hmm. I think it did make, as much money as I thought I would. It would actually, because one thing I can say is that if it's your first indie game, you can't make a living off of making indie games. Like, you honestly can't. You're gonna earn like maybe $100 something a month
Yeah.
for a majority of your games if they do well. You have to keep like doing them, and then eventually build like enough of a following to actually like really make any legitimate money off of indie games.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Talking to a lot of developers, they talk about the trouble of getting it out there because you can put together a really good game, but it can be difficult in a sea of all these different types of games from PC to mobile.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you looked for, any techniques that you were like, hey, this is what I need to do to get out there? Obviously, you have like Twitter, social media, things like that. But were
Well,
there any
what I
tools?
figured out is basically like I looked at to figure out how to get my game out there and review sites other than YouTubers or streamers. For YouTubers and streamers, I just looked at whoever is streaming Blue Revolver. Well, first off, who am I friends with? And then who's streaming Blue Revolver? Who's streaming what's another game? Omodora. Who's streaming I don't know, Wizorb. And that's another Breakout game. And once I do that, I'm like, okay, these people play retro indie games. Maybe I should send it to them. And that usually helps the sales like a lot. And then, but as for like review sites, I usually just stick to mainly like something I've learned from marketing my game is that you really just want to send it to like ones that you know are going to cover it, like Hardcore Gamer, Digital Fix, Cube 3, Game Skinny, Gaming Trend, and I forget the other one. Game Spew. Yeah. Thing is, people don't really read like text reviews as much, and they're good for like, you know, to sell your game that much. So you want to go what will sell your game is if those reviews are listed on Metacritic or OpenCritic. So I think really you should just go to sites that, you know, are listed on Metacritic or OpenCritic and then just send it to those. And then regarding YouTubers and streamers, just send it to, you know, whoever you're able to.
So as far as the local aspect, Obsolete Gamer based in Miami, we talked to a lot of different gamers from Florida and working with Make Games Miami. Um, what is your relationship with like Make Games Miami? And I see that like on your page you talked about having that community supporting other Florida-based gamers. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm actually like a resident Miami-Dade. I'm going to college in Orlando. My artist is also a resident and going to college in Tampa. I think, you know, I feel like there aren't really a lot of like there are good games coming from South Florida, Central Florida, etc. But I feel, you know, there needs to be a lot more, and I'm hoping to get more people like motivated and like making games that are in here. And wait, what was your question again?
Just overall like the community of working with other or at least just supporting other people from Florida.
Well, actually, I'm looking forward to or I'm looking into doing a talk at Florida SuperCon this July because not only is Aliens Go Home Run come out, but I'm also producing a another game on Steam called Wonder Wickets. Well, it's not on Steam yet. It's coming to Steam, but I'm helping with like testing and getting word out there. I've been using my connections I've gotten from Aliens Go Home Run to do it. I met Make Games Miami. I just looked it up through like a I think it was either Meetup or Facebook. I forget exactly where, but I just started making like connections with them on like SuperCon 2016, and I've been keeping in touch with them every now and then.
So as far as the company name, is it Anime Ace?
It's Animace, Animace. It's
Oh,
almost
okay.
pronounced like animes, as
Ah,
someone
okay.
would say. It's like one of my Japanese animes.
Cool. So when did you put together that company name?
Um, right after Aliens Go Home Run come out, I wanted to do like a different name because originally I would go by the name Alt Dev for my games, and Artisano didn't really have that many games. I think he just went by Artisano, and I wanted something that, you know, was both me and him. It wouldn't just be like Alt Dev or whatever, especially since I wouldn't necessarily be developing all the games we made. So I just was like doodling around in like Paint Tool Sci, and I just drew like this A star sorta. And I'm like, oh, hey, that's a cool logo. What do I call this? Ace Dev, Ace.vg. And I'm like, how about an Anim Ace? So that's cool. Yeah, because URL wasn't taken on Tumblr or anything.
Yeah, I also saw, speaking of Tumblr, that you have actually a figurine on Etsy. That was pretty cool. What was the behind putting something together like that? Because most people don't even think to put together like a figurine.
Yeah, well, basically, it originally started with like I wanted to get a gift for Artisano for his birthday, which was in January. So I'm like, who does good figures of like his characters? So I heard about this artist from a mutual friend of mine named Closey. I mean, the artist is named Closey. Mutual friend of mine is someone else. But basically, she does like resin figures and stuff like that. You know, makes a mold and then well, first makes like a sculpture and then makes a mold out of it and then puts resin in it and then lets it like cool and all that stuff. And so I commissioned a figure, like two figures, one for myself, one for Artisano, for $95 for both of them, not individual, like $95 for the two of them. And then after that, He's like, hey, can I make more? And I'm like, sure. If you could split the profit, that'd be cool. And she did.
Nice. All right. So overall, you've talked about like the game like Bayonetta and things like that. Are you also a fan of classic games since they actually mentioned, like this is inspired from Breakout and stuff like that? Are there other classic games that you are
Yeah,
into?
there's a lot of classic games I enjoy. I actually used to write for a site called Hardcore Gaming 101 where I talk about a lot of retro and obscure arcade games.
More console or like
Super Metroid is probably one of my favorite ones.
nice?
Another favorite is like Mega Man 2. I honestly, a lot of people prefer X and Zero, but I think I honestly still prefer like the classic series.
Oh
Um,
yeah, the Mega Man 2 was definitely a classic.
I also am a really big fan of like Treasure's output, like Gunstar Heroes, Alien
Mm.
Soldier, Mischief Makers, stuff like that. I feel like a lot of their stuff has had an influence on like the bosses in my game and also a lot of other stuff. Gradius is also another major influence. That's another thing people point out is that I think, Gradius's power up system is actually really neat. Where you have to keep getting like more power up things in order to get better ones. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean, a lot of those old classic games just have that gameplay style that, you can go back and continue playing. Like even with newer games, they might come out and be awesome, but you end up beating it once, maybe playing multiplayer if it hasn't, and then that's it. But some of those old school games you can just keep playing over and over again.
Yeah. I think some of my favorite like modern games now though that I think have had an influence on my design philosophy are like Freedom Planet, Knowing to Love 2, as I mentioned before, Bayonetta 1 and 2, Wonderful 101, and Duck Game. Those are like my top five right now, honestly.
Well, the game you can pick up right now on Steam, Aliens Go Home Run. You gotta support those indie developers because they're coming out with a lot of great games that are, innovative, and that's the thing. Especially when you have a lot of games that come out that are just copies or remakes or sequels. So I hope that not only that you will support indie gamers, but also gamers and developers from Florida, because we're trying to make our mark here. But thanks,
Yeah.
Aaron, for coming on and talking with us today.
No problem.